like, make your team bad. Let Pascal just do his thing. Average like 25 points per game, which will be slightly inflated, and then just get a decent draft pick and try to go from there. I also want this because it makes the playoff race easier for the Bulls.
Okay. Okay, this may be
because I think if they stay competitive, they'll definitely be better than the Bulls if they just stuck with what they have now. Okay, I'm not going to walk into frame with a blaring siren this time. But still, holy shit. I never saw that Kawhi Leonard Paul George thing coming. Not that that's saying anything because no one saw that coming. Seriously, whoever is running Paul George's camp and or is working for the Thunder's front office does a great job of keeping shit under wraps. I mean, Paul George demanded a trade and no one heard shit about it. I mean, when does that ever happen? When Kristaps Porzingis demanded a trade, we knew about it almost instantly. And he was traded almost instantly. Apparently, Paul George had asked for the trade 3 days before it happened. That's pretty damn long for it to go unreported. But anyways, that is not what this video is about. Just had to get that thought out there. This video is about the future of the Raptors, something I find gets put to the side every time a big move happens. Most people don't talk about the team that actually loses the star. That is where I come in, because 1, everyone and their mother is going to talk about the Clippers, and 2, taking a unique angle gets me more views. The Raptors lost Kawhi Leonard, and that has to be pretty damn bittersweet. You lose, in my opinion, the best player in the NBA, but you did just win a championship with him. Something that was never going to happen with DeMar DeRozan as your best player. So you're happy that your team made this move, and you're obviously happy with the 2019 title, but regardless of what happened in your past, having an unsure future is never fun. Luckily for Raptors fans, there is a solid building block for the future, and that is Pascal Siakam, but outside of that, it's pretty iffy in terms of the future. Paying Marc Gasol $25 million a year at age 34. They're paying Kyle Lowry $33 million at age 33. And as far as young talent, outside of Pascal, there's nothing but a couple of potential quality role players. But there is always a way to improve a team, so let's figure out how the Raptors do that.
Rebound. Save. Absolutely incredibly with the acrobatic alley-oop.
Before we start, I wanted to quickly shout out my podcast. Me and Mojo99 have started a podcast where we talk about the NBA. Duh. But we just released an episode about the best offseason of all time, which would be this one. So go check that out. Link will be in the description and will be in the card above. But with that out of the way, let's start the video. Okay. First things first, we need to evaluate this roster. For the point guard rotation, there is Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet. However, I do think there is a good chance that Father Fred ends up starting at the 2 guard with Danny Green leaving. Because outside of Danny Green, the Raptors' shooting guard depth was pretty bad. Their shooting guard rotation now is Norman Powell and Jodie Meeks. Norman is pretty solid, but not ideally your starting shooting guard. For small forwards, OG Anunoby and Stanley Johnson. Both are young. The Raptors signed Johnson simply for the fact that he is young. It doesn't look like he's going to reach what we thought his potential would be because it doesn't seem like he's improved over the last 4 years of his career. And him never having shot 40% from the field for his career, and he's never shot 31% or better from 3. It's not a good sign. But who knows? For him, maybe a change of scenery would make a big difference. At power forward, obviously we have Pascal, and then we have Rondae Hollis-Jefferson. With Rondae, I think the dude has a lot of potential as a versatile 4. He is a really good switchy defender, and he's a good ball handler for a power forward. He is also fairly athletic. His only big issue is shooting the ball. He's never even shot 30% from 3. But in the 2017-18 season, he averaged 14 and 7 on 47% shooting, so he does have some potential as an offensive player. You just need to surround him with some spacing. I was actually hoping that the Bulls would take a shot at Rondae, but they went with Thaddeus Young, who I think is a fair comparison for Rondae Hollis-Jefferson. Difference misses that Thad can shoot. With Pascal, I do not personally believe he could become the best player on a championship team, but I also wouldn't entirely bet against it, because his athleticism, ball handling, and defense for a 24-year-old is very promising. But if I had to guess, he can be the second to third best player on a championship team, depending on how good the first player is. A multiple-time All-Star, but if he is your best player for a decade, you're pretty much asking to become the Charlotte Hornets. And at center, we have old-ass Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka, and those are your 2019-20 Toronto Raptors. Looking at this roster, there are two main options. You can either retool or you can rebuild. Retooling is basically trying to compete while vastly improving the roster, and that's hard. Or you can just trade all your veterans for some young players and whatever draft assets you can get and build from there. I would personally go the rebuild route. As great as I think Masai Ujiri is, a retooling is pretty tough. Granted, it did work out for the Clippers, but I don't think Ujiri is on the god tier level of Jerry West. And the Spurs as well have pretty much always retooled over rebuilding. I will talk about retooling and rebuilding, and I'm going to start with retooling because the way it's going, I think that's probably what they're going to do. To retool, you have to try to compete while getting some young players, and to do that, you have to scout really well, and you have to draft late in the first round and try and pick up some diamonds in the rough like the Spurs have for the last 3 decades. Taking waivers on young players, maybe making some calculated risks. You could trade for some young players on contending teams that really don't get any playtime. Jared Vanderbilt is on the Nuggets getting no PT, but I think he has the potential to be a Lamar Odom type of player, just hopefully without the crack and Kardashians. If you offered enough, I think you could get Robert Williams from the Celtics. A second or two could get you Jalen Hands from the Nets, Chandler Hutchinson from the Bulls, Justin Jackson from the Mavericks, Jordan Poole from the Warriors, Aaron Holiday from the Pacers, and there are many other examples. I would probably shoot for Aaron Holiday and Jarrett Vanderbilt because I'm confident that both of them will be really good and their teams won't be asking too much for them. That's the young guys side of it. You can also try to trade for some more established older players to try and stay competitive. Bradley Beal for OG Anunoby and 2 first-round picks could be a move that could happen. I think the Wizards could probably do better, but who knows. That's essentially what retooling would look like. As I said before, retooling is a lot harder than rebuilding, but in the long term it can end up being more beneficial, if you can pull it off. One of the negatives of rebuilding is you're setting up a team to lose, and after a couple of years you could still very well be losing because you drafted a bunch of players who are used to losing. When it comes to effort, especially on defense, when you already know that you're going to lose, why would you give that effort? It's hard to get out of a losing mindset, so if you stick with a somewhat winning mindset while still growing the team, it can be beneficial. That probably would have helped the Phoenix Suns. So retooling can be more beneficial to your team's mindset, but it is a lot more gradual and slow of a process, and it's a lot harder to pull off, and you can't really get any high-level talents, generally speaking, that way. Now let's talk about a potential rebuild. The first step would be trading all the vets who have value. Those vets would be Kyle Lowry, Marc Gasol, and Serge Ibaka. Fred VanVleet is only 24, so you can keep him around. Now originally I thought there's no fucking way that you can trade Kyle Lowry and Marc Gasol, but actually both of them are on 1-year deals, so it is possible. But trading those two definitely means that you are getting a bad contract in return. For Gasol, I would actually just keep him, because you really are not going to get much of anything for him, and it's not worth taking on a contract that doesn't expire this offseason. The reason for that we will tackle later. Now let's move on to Kyle Lowry. I think you can get something good for him. My last video was on Russell Westbrook, speculating on what trade scenarios there would be for Russ. A lot of the places that I said Russ could be traded could be landing spots for Kyle Lowry as well. Both of the Florida teams, the Spurs, the Wolves, the Suns, the Mavericks, and the Pistons are all good spots for Kyle Lowry. I'm not going to go too in-depth with these potential trades. Ain't nobody got time to make all of those graphics. But for the Heat, I think you could trade Lowry for Kendrick Nunn, Dion Waiters, Ryan Anderson in a first-round pick. For the Magic, you could get Fultz in a first or Khem Birch in a first. For the Spurs, Lonnie Walker, Patty Mills, Marco Bellinelli, and Damari Carroll. Those last 4 are for contract reasons. For the Wolves, the Maple Mamba comes to Toronto, and hopefully a change of scenery, particularly in his home country, could do him some good. For the Suns, Mikal Bridges and Tyler Johnson, as well as some seconds. The Mavs can give you Jalen Brunson, Tim Hardaway Jr., and some seconds. And for the Pistons, you could either get Sekou Doumbouya or Luke Kennard, and then you have to bring in Reggie Jackson, Langston Galloway, and Tony Snell for salary reasons. Lowry, with his age and what is assumed to be his decline, will not get you a whole lot of value, especially when you're trading young assets for him, so keep that in mind. Now, the reason I said not to trade Gasol is that you do not want to get locked into a bad contract long term because of the 2020 free agency class. Now, I think it should be said that this wasn't originally my idea, it was a Funky Diabetics, but the 2020 free agent class is full of a bunch of young players. Brandon Ingram, Jaylen Brown, and Buddy Hield are the potential star level players available, and then there are guys like Domantas Sabonis, Malik Beasley, DeJounte Murray, and Taurean Prince who will also be available. The reason you keep Gasol is because after his contract expires, you could potentially throw a good amount of money to some of these young players, potentially more money than those teams are willing to match. Jaylen Brown, I think, would be the most likely option. I have a video planned to talk about Kemba Walker to the Celtics. I have no idea if I'll do it, but to spoil that video, one of the main talking points will be about Jaylen Brown and how Kemba Walker being there could result in Jaylen Brown no longer being a Celtic. Basically, Kemba takes away Brown's touches, limiting how impactful he can be, and because of that, Danny Ainge might not be willing to match a big contract offer for Brown. Basically, Kemba takes away some of the touches that Jaylen Brown could be getting, and it reduces how impactful he can be, so as a result, Danny Ainge might not be willing to match a big contract for him if he's not going to have a massive impact. So Jaylen Brown could become a Toronto Raptor this offseason, giving Brown more opportunity to become a star. A team of Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, and Jaylen Brown, as well as a high lottery pick, and whatever you get for Kyle Lowry, is a very solid young core. You could potentially decide not to trade Lowry and have even more money for free agency and bring in a guy like Sabonis or Murray. I don't know, but these are the potential options for the Toronto Raptors, and it could be a look into their future. That's the end of this video. Please be sure to check out the third episode of the Hoopscast talking about this year's free agency. Like and subscribe, and cue the outro music.